Hey everyone. So you're prepping for an interview as a leather goods stitching machine operator. Well, congrats. That's awesome.
Exciting times.
You sent over some really helpful RoleCatcher resources, their career guide, interview guide, even some info on their AI platform itself. So we're going to dive deep into all of that today.
Sounds good.
But we're not just going to skim the surface.
Right.
We really want to unpack what do the interviewers actually want to hear, and how can you show them the best version of yourself?
Absolutely. And that's especially true when we bring in those insights that RoleCatcher's AI can give us.
It's like a secret weapon.
Yeah.
But first, to set the stage, the career guide mentions something super interesting that I bet caught your eye.
Okay.
You won't just be working on a typical flatbed sewing machine. They talk about arm and multi-column machines, too. Have you ever heard of these?
Mm-hmm. I bet that got your attention. It means this role is a lot more dynamic than people might think. I mean, those specialized machines are for different types of leather goods. And the fact that they're even mentioned in the guide means you might be working on a wider variety of products than you'd expect.
Right, so it's not just about stitching a straight seam.
Yeah.
You might be responsible for the whole product,
Right.
making sure its quality is good from start to finish.
Absolutely.
Which leads perfectly into one of the key questions from the interview guide. How do you ensure the quality of your work as a leather goods stitching machine operator?
That's a big one. And this is where your answer can make a real difference. They want to see that you are meticulous, that you have a systematic approach. Don't just say, I double-check my work. Talk about specific steps you take throughout the process.
So give me an example. What would be a good answer?
You could say something like, I start by inspecting every piece of leather for flaws before I even thread the machine. And then during stitching, I'm always monitoring the tension, and I make adjustments as needed. And finally, after I finish a seam, I actually use a magnifying glass to double check for any missed stitches or inconsistencies.
Wow. Attention to detail right there.
Yeah.
Using a magnifying glass. That shows you really go above and beyond.
Exactly.
But what if the interviewer throws you a curveball? Like they want to see how you handle the unexpected. And they say something like, what would you do if you noticed a flaw in the leather after you'd already started stitching? How do you recover from that?
Oh, definitely. You got to be honest. And stay calm. You could say, well, I would immediately stop stitching and then assess the situation. Like, how bad is this flaw?
Okay.
If possible, I would try to maybe incorporate it into the design or camouflage it using a certain technique.
Oh, interesting.
But if it's really bad, I would talk to my supervisor and see what they think is the best way to move forward, Do we need to replace the leather? Do we need to change the design? What do we do?
That's a great answer because it shows you take responsibility and that you're solution-oriented.
Yes.
And that you understand the importance of collaboration.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, let's try a different question. This time, let's focus on your experience. What types of leather goods have you worked on in the past? I know this might feel a little bit intimidating if you're just starting out.
Yeah.
Don't worry.
It's all about how you present it. They're looking for someone who's versatile and adaptable. So if you have experience, definitely highlight the range of things you've worked on. Wallets, bags, jackets, whatever it is. But if you're new to this, focus on your eagerness to learn and those skills you have that could transfer over.
So let's say you've mostly worked on smaller items.
Yeah.
How would you spin that in a positive way?
You could say, well, my experience so far has mainly been on smaller things like wallets and keychains.
Okay.
But I'm really eager to expand my skill set. I want to work on bigger, more complex projects. I'm a fast learner, and I'm confident I can quickly adapt to new designs and techniques.
That's a great way to show enthusiasm and a willingness to grow. And speaking of growth, I want to tie in some insights from the RoleCatcher Career Guide.
All right.
They actually outline different stages in a leather goods stitching machine operator's career, from entry level all the way up to master level.
It's so cool. It shows there's real potential in this field. You can really advance.
Yeah. The master level, that caught my eye too. They're not just stitching at that point. They're developing new techniques. They're collaborating with designers.
Yeah, it's about mastering the craft.
So how can you use this knowledge to your advantage in the interview?
I would think about that classic question. Where do you see yourself in 5 years? And instead of just saying, oh, I want a more senior position, you could say, I'm really excited about the growth potential in this field.
Yeah.
I see myself mastering new techniques and collaborating on custom designs. My goal is to reach that master level and share my expertise while leading a team of skilled craftspeople.
That's an answer that shows ambition and a clear understanding of where this job could take you.
Exactly.
But what if they ask you about a time you made a mistake? Nobody's perfect. We all mess up sometimes. How do you answer that question without making excuses?
This question is all about handling setbacks. It's crucial to be honest and demonstrate a positive approach. Instead of dwelling on the mistake, focus on the steps you took to correct it and what you learned from the experience.
Okay, so what would a good answer sound like?
You could say something like, I understand that mistakes can happen, but I always aim for accuracy. If I make an error, I immediately stop and assess the situation. If possible, I'll try to correct it using appropriate techniques. But if it's significant or could compromise the product's quality, I consult with my supervisor to find the best solution.
It shows you're responsible and committed to quality. Now, let's switch gears a bit. Let's talk about a question that really allows you to shine. Something like, can you describe a particularly challenging project you worked on and how you overcame obstacles?
I love this one. This is your chance to tell a story and really highlight your problem-solving skills, your adaptability, your dedication, all of that. But don't just list tasks. Paint a vivid picture of the project, the challenges you faced, and the steps you took to overcome them.
So what would be a good example? For someone in this role?
Let's imagine you were tasked with stitching a complex handbag.
Okay.
One with all those curves and multiple compartments.
Yeah.
You could talk about the difficulty of maintaining that consistent stitch tension around tight curves.
Oh, yeah?
Or the precision needed to align multiple layers of leather and lining. Or the challenge of incorporating delicate hardware without damaging the surrounding material.
Yeah, these are real challenges. So how would you describe overcoming those obstacles?
Talk about experimenting with different needles and thread tensions to find just the right combo for those curved seams. You could mention using a temporary adhesive to hold the layers in place while you stitch, or even creating custom templates to make sure that hardware goes in exactly the right spot.
That shows you're resourceful. And you can think outside the box.
Yes.
And remember, it's not just about technical skills. You want to highlight that perseverance, that pride you take in your work.
Exactly. End your story by emphasizing the positive outcome, whether that's meeting a tight deadline or receiving positive feedback or learning a new skill.
Yeah. That's how you wrap up a compelling story. But before we move on, let's talk about how RoleCatcher's AI can really give you an advantage in your interview prep.
Okay.
We've touched on their career insights.
Yeah.
But their AI goes way beyond that.
It really does.
It's like having a personal career coach in your pocket.
Yeah.
Analyzing your strengths and weaknesses.
Yeah.
And get this, they can actually identify skill gaps you might not even realize you have.
It's amazing. It can even tailor your answers to highlight those skills that employers in the leather goods industry, that's the key, are specifically looking for.
It's not just about memorizing generic responses. It's about crafting answers that resonate with this particular field.
Absolutely. And that leads us to another fantastic feature they have, their AI-powered video practice tool.
Oh, yeah, that one. It's like having a mock interview, but with, super-powered feedback.
I know.
Because it analyzes not just what you say, but how you say it. Your body language, your tone of voice, even your eye contact.
And all of that feedback is tailored to the role of a leather goods stitching machine operator, which I think is pretty cool.
It's amazing. Yeah. It really is a game changer. Okay, I think we've covered a lot of ground in this first part of our deep dive.
We have.
We've unpacked what the interviewers really want. We tackled some tough questions. And we even saw how RoleCatcher's AI can give you that extra edge.
We have. And you know what? I think you're going to be amazing.
I think so, too.
Because you've got the knowledge, you've got the skills, and you have these incredible resources to help you succeed. So remember to let your passion shine through. Show them your enthusiasm for the craft, and I know you're going to impress them. All right, welcome back. We're diving into some more of those tricky interview questions that you might encounter for a leather goods stitching machine operator role. Ready for the next challenge?
Absolutely. Let's do it.
Okay, this one is all about showing off your technical know-how. The interview guide asks, can you describe the different types of stitching techniques you use as a leather goods stitching machine operator? Now, you might be tempted to just list off the ones you know.
Yeah.
But there's a way to make your answer really stand out, really impress them.
Okay, I'm intrigued. How do we take a simple question like that to the next level?
Instead of just naming the techniques, show them you really understand when and why you'd use each one. For example, you could say, I'm proficient in a variety of stitching techniques, like the lock stitch, the chain stitch, and saddle stitch. I usually use lock stitch for most seams because it's really strong and durable.
Hmm.
While the chain stitch is great for decorative stitching or areas that need a little bit of stretch, and saddle stitch, although it takes more time, creates that beautiful hand-stitched look that's perfect for like high-end leather goods.
That's a great answer. You're not just showing the techniques, you're showing how to actually apply them.
Exactly.
I can practically see the interviewer nodding along,
Yeah.
impressed.
Yeah.
But what if they decide to put those skills to the test
Okay.
and they throw a scenario at you? Like, imagine you're working on a project that requires a really strong but flexible seam. Which stitching technique would you choose and why?
Ooh, I like that one. This is where your knowledge really shines.
All right, time to think on your feet. How would you
Uh,
tackle that?
Well, you could say, for a seam that needs both strength and flexibility, I'd probably go with a lock stitch, but I'd use a slightly longer stitch length.
Okay.
The lock stitch gives you that durability, but the longer stitch allows for a bit more give, making it ideal for areas that might experience, stress or movement.
That's a perfect blend of expertise and practical know-how. I bet that would really make you stand out.
Yeah.
Now, shifting gears a bit, the career guide really emphasizes the importance of continuous learning in this field.
Right.
They even mention things like attending workshops and keeping up with trends as ways to move up in your career.
It's great that they highlight that because it shows that being a leather goods stitching machine operator isn't just a job, it's a craft. And you can always be improving, you can always be learning.
So how do we tie that back into our interview prep?
Think about how you can showcase that dedication to learning in your answers. Like, for example, if they ask you, how do you stay up to date on new stitching techniques and technologies? Don't just say, I read magazines. Go a little deeper than that.
So give me an example. What would be an answer that really shows you're excited about growing in this field?
You could say, I'm really passionate about staying on top of what's new in this industry. I attend trade shows and conferences to see firsthand the latest innovations in stitching techniques and technologies.
Okay.
I also subscribe to those industry publications and follow those online forums where everyone's talking about the newest trends. For me, continuous learning is super important for any skilled craftsperson, and I'm always eager to bring that new knowledge into my work.
That just radiates enthusiasm and commitment.
Yeah.
I'm sure they'd be impressed with that. Now, speaking of impressive, let's not forget about RoleCatcher's AI-powered tools. We talked about them before, but I'm curious, how can they actually help us answer these really technical questions?
Well, RoleCatcher's AI is really cool. It can analyze your responses and give you feedback tailored to that specific job you're applying for. It's like having an industry expert critiquing your answers.
So it's not just about knowing the right answer. It's about presenting those answers in a way that's going to make sense to employers in this field.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, so that brings us to another question. This one's all about showing off your organizational skills. How do you prioritize your work when you have multiple projects to complete? Now, this is a pretty common question, but there's got to be a way to tailor it specifically for this role, right?
Yeah, you're right. It's all about showing them you understand the demands of a leather goods production environment. You want to highlight your ability to manage deadlines, prioritize tasks, and keep that workflow moving smoothly.
So instead of just saying, I make a to-do list,
Yeah.
how do you give an answer that really stands out?
You could try something like this. When I have multiple projects going on, I prioritize based on the deadlines and how complex each task is. I start by checking the production schedule and figuring out which orders are the most urgent. Then I look at each design and see how intricate it is, and I allocate my time accordingly, making sure to give enough attention to detail, but also staying efficient. And I always make sure to communicate with my supervisor and teammates so we're all on the same page and we meet those production goals together.
Now, that's a great answer. It shows you're organized, but it also shows that you understand the importance of teamwork and communication in this environment.
It's a team effort.
Right. But I bet they might want to see how you handle those unexpected problems that always seem to pop up.
Oh, for sure. They could say something like, okay, let's say you're working on a rush order and all of a sudden a machine breaks down. What do you do?
Okay, the pressure's on. What's your response?
Well, first, I would make sure I'm safe and follow all the procedures for dealing with that malfunction. Then, I'd let my supervisor know right away about the problem and tell them that the rush order might be delayed. While I'm waiting for help, I'd see if there are any other machines I can use, or maybe work on other tasks for different projects so I can still be productive.
Brilliant. You've shown you can think on your feet, that you prioritize safety, and you stay calm under pressure. Now, let's get back to those technical skills for a second. The interview guide asks, how do you maintain and repair your stitching machine? This might seem straightforward, but I'm sure there's a way to give an answer that really impresses.
Definitely. Instead of just saying, I clean it regularly, you want to show that you're proactive and really thorough when it comes to taking care of your machine.
Okay, give me an example of a stellar answer.
I know that a well-maintained machine is key to making sure everything is high quality and runs smoothly. I follow a regular maintenance schedule. I clean and oil the machine. I check and adjust the tension, and I look at the needles and other parts for any wear and tear. I also keep a log of any issues or repairs so I can keep track of how the machine's performing. And if something comes up, I try to troubleshoot it using what I know about the machine. But if I can't fix it, I let my supervisor know immediately to prevent any further damage or delays.
That's incredibly impressive.
Yeah.
You're showing responsibility, a deep understanding of the machine, and that you take initiative when it comes to solving problems. It really highlights your commitment to quality. But what if they want even more? Like they want you to get really specific.
They could ask, can you give an example of a specific maintenance task that you do and explain why it's important? And this is where you get to show off your expertise a little bit.
Okay, let's get specific. What example would really wow them?
Well, you could talk about something like cleaning the feed dog. You could explain how all that lint and debris can build up and affect how the fabric moves and how well the stitches come out.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Or you can talk about lubricating the bobbin case and how that helps the thread flow smoothly and prevents tension problems.
Those are great examples. It's not just about knowing what to do. It's about understanding why it matters. Okay, before we move on, I want to go back to something you mentioned earlier. That idea of always learning and keeping up with what's new in this field.
So important, especially with technology changing so quickly.
The interview guide actually has a question about this. How do you stay up to date on new stitching techniques and technologies in the leather goods industry? This is your chance to show how passionate you are about this work and how dedicated you are to being the best.
Yeah. It's about showing that you don't just want to do things the same way they've always been done. You're excited to learn, explore new things, and push those boundaries in leather goods production.
So how do we take a simple question like that and turn it into a knockout answer?
I would talk about how involved you are in the industry.
Yeah.
Instead of just listing sources, you could say something like, I'm really passionate about staying at the forefront of the leather goods industry. I make a point of going to those trade shows and conferences where I can see all the latest innovations in stitching techniques and technologies for myself. And of course, I subscribe to all the major industry publications and stay active in those online forums and communities where everyone's talking about the new trends and advancements. Continuous learning is essential for any skilled craftsperson, and I'm always excited to use new techniques and technologies in my work.
You're not just reading about this stuff, you're out there experiencing it firsthand.
Exactly.
That's amazing. I bet they'd be really impressed by that. But what if they want to see how you would actually apply that knowledge?
Right.
Could they follow up with something more specific?
Definitely. They could say, can you describe a new stitching technique or technology that you've recently learned about, and how do you think it could be applied in our production process? This is where you can really demonstrate your critical thinking skills and show that you can connect what you know to the real world.
Okay, challenge accepted. What are some examples that would really wow them?
Think about those newer technologies like laser stitching or ultrasonic welding. You could explain how those techniques could make things more precise, speed up production, or even create totally unique design elements that weren't possible before.
Oh, interesting.
Or you could talk about new software programs for designing and digitizing stitching patterns, and how that can really streamline the design process and reduce errors.
That's amazing. You're not just aware of these things, you're actually thinking about how they can be used to make things better.
Absolutely.
I'm sure that kind of forward thinking would really stand out. Now, before we move on, I want to talk about teamwork for a second.
Okay.
It's super important in any production environment.
Oh, for sure. In leather goods production, everyone has to work together. The designers, the cutters, the stitchers, everybody.
And the interview guide actually has a question that gets right to the heart of this. It asks, how do you communicate with other team members, like designers or leather cutters, to make sure a project is completed successfully? Now, we all know that communication is important, but how do we make our answer stand out?
It's all about showing your specific communication skills. Instead of just saying, I talk to people, highlight those behaviors that demonstrate clear, concise, and proactive communication.
Okay, I'm ready. What would a great answer sound like?
Okay, you could say something like this. I really believe that good communication is key to working together smoothly and creating high-quality products. So I make a point of communicating clearly and respectfully with everyone on the team.
Okay.
I listen carefully to instructions, I ask questions if I need to clarify the design specs or any requirements, and I give regular updates on my progress. I also think it's super important to point out any potential problems early on so we can avoid delays or misunderstandings.
Yeah, makes sense.
And of course, I'm always open to feedback and suggestions from my teammates. It's a team effort, and we can all learn from each other.
Excellent answer. You've highlighted active listening, clear communication, and a collaborative mindset. All those things are super important for a team player.
Exactly.
But what if they want to go a little deeper and see how you handle conflict?
Mm.
Could they ask you about a time you had to work through a disagreement or a miscommunication with a teammate?
Definitely. That's a pretty common question. They want to see how you handle those tricky interpersonal situations. They might ask something like, have you ever been in a situation where there was a disagreement or a misunderstanding with someone on your team? How did you deal with it?
Okay, let's put on our conflict resolution hats. How would you approach this question?
You want to emphasize that disagreements are normal, but what matters is how you deal with them. You could say something like, I remember one time there was a problem with the stitching pattern and the markings the leather cutter had made. Instead of blaming anyone, I calmly talked to both the designer and the cutter about it.
Okay.
We all looked at the design specs together and talked about the best way to move forward. In the end, we came up with a solution that kept the design intact and didn't cause any delays.
That's a great example. It shows that you can stay calm and focused on finding a solution even when things get a little tough.
It's all about communication.
Okay, let's move on to a question that lets you really showcase your ability to handle those really challenging projects. The interview guy asks, can you describe a particularly challenging project you worked on as a leather goods stitching machine operator and how you overcame any obstacles? So, this is your chance to tell a story that really highlights your skills, your adaptability, and your commitment to quality.
Oh, I love these story questions. This is where you can make a real impression. But remember, it's not just about what you did. It's about how you did it. Talk about your process, your creativity, how you stuck with it, and how you went above and beyond.
I'm ready for a good story. What kind of situation would really show those qualities?
Let's go back to that complex handbag.
Okay.
Remember all those curves and compartments? What were some of the specific challenges you faced? You could talk about keeping the stitch tension consistent around those tight curves, or the precision needed to line up all those layers of leather and lining, or even how tough it was to put in those delicate hardware pieces without damaging anything.
I can already feel the tension.
Yeah.
So how did you overcome those obstacles? What did you do to make sure the project was a success?
Talk about your problem-solving process. Maybe you experimented with different needles and thread tensions to get it just right for those curves.
Okay.
You could talk about using temporary adhesive to hold those layers in place while you're stitching, or even making your own templates to ensure the hardware was perfectly positioned.
That's amazing. You were really determined to find the right solutions. But it's not just about the technical side of things. They want to see someone who is resourceful, who doesn't give up easily, and who takes pride in their work.
Absolutely. And that's why you should wrap up your story by talking about the positive outcome. Did you meet a tight deadline? Did your supervisor or client give you great feedback? Did you learn a new skill that you can now use on other projects?
All great points to highlight. Okay, we've really tackled some tough interview questions. But before we wrap up this deep dive, I want to circle back to those AI-powered tools from RoleCatcher.
I know, right? They're so helpful.
We talked about how they can tailor your resume, find those hidden skill gaps, and even give you feedback on your video practice. Is there anything else they offer that can help us with these tough questions?
They have a really cool feature called AI-powered question analysis.
Oh, what's that?
You could actually type in your answers to common interview questions, and their AI will analyze them for you. It will give you feedback on the content, how clear your answers are, and how relevant they are to the job you're applying for.
It's incredible. It's like having a personal coach right there in your pocket.
I know. And it's all tailored to help you improve your answers and make the best possible impression.
I can definitely see how helpful that would be. All right, are you ready to dive into some more interview questions and get those final tips that will help you ace that interview?
Absolutely. Bring on the challenge.
All right, welcome back for the final part of our deep dive on acing that leather goods stitching machine operator interview. We've covered so much, from really understanding this job to tackling those tricky interview questions.
And of course, we talked about how RoleCatcher's AI can help you stand out.
Yeah, it's an amazing resource. But before we send you off to conquer that interview, I did want to touch on one more thing. The career guide mentions something that we should keep in mind. They talk about the possibility of being exposed to harmful chemicals or fumes as kind of a downside to this job. Something to think about as you're looking at different companies.
You're right. Safety should always be top of mind.
Definitely. Now, we can't go over every single safety concern here, but I do encourage you to do your own research.
Yeah, that's a great idea.
Look into specific safety practices and regulations for the leather goods industry. You can even ask about those safety protocols during the interview.
That's a really good point. It shows you're proactive and care about safety and that you're taking this seriously.
Right. And it could even lead to a conversation about the company's commitment to their employees' well-being. Always a good sign.
Absolutely.
Okay, I think we've covered a ton of ground in this deep dive. We've gone over what interviewers are looking for, tackled some of those tough questions, and even looked at how RoleCatcher's AI can give you an advantage.
It's been great.
I've learned a lot, and I have a feeling you're going to rock that interview. You've got the knowledge, you've got the skills, and the resources.
Don't forget the passion. Show them how much you love this craft, and I know you'll impress them.
You got this. Go ace that interview.